Ever since I first started playing Elden Ring Nightreign, I have been fascinated by the neatly organized list of Nightlords, the bosses you can challenge, and the way you can choose from Nightfarers to play as. And since there is 8 bosses and 8 main characters, I always wondered if there is a connection between them and tried to pair them up and connect them somehow, and I believe I finally managed to crack the code how to do so. So in this video, I'm going to explain my theory that I named the Mirror Theory, and I'm calling it as such because it seems like all the Nightlords and Nightfarers are the reflection of each other, or in other words, having some sort of a connection or a similarity from a story and narrative perspective. As well as even in a gameplay perspective, they can be a perfect matchup, and even the order of the Nightlords and Nightfarers are organized in such a way to help you make the connection. In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 different categories of connections. First is how all the 8 Nightlords can be split into 4 and 4, as they reflect each other within their own group, and then the 8 Nightfarers also reflecting each other in a separate 4 and 4 group. And then adding all these 16 characters together and explain how they can be split into a group of 8 and 8, and how the bosses and the main characters are the reflection of each other and there is a connection between them in a narrative or visual design perspective. To demonstrate and help you better imagine, let's use a lake as a template as its water surface reflecting the moon and the trees above. So for example, we can have the moon as the highest point of this image, and the moon's water reflection can be seen on the lowest point. And as you take steps further towards the center, the dividing line between the 2 images, you can see the reflection of trees and so on. So let's draw a dividing line in the middle. Imagine it being the mirror, or the surface of the water, which is the point where the image above reflects the image below. And now let's organize and put all the 8 Nightlords onto it in the same order as they appear on the expedition menu screen. At first look, the organization of the bosses makes sense from a gameplay perspective, as you assume you start with the easiest boss at the top, and as you progress, you unlock harder and harder bosses below. This order also makes sense from a narrative perspective as well though. First, you have to defeat Gladius, the red wolf of Heolstor, who resembles the 3-headed Cerberus in Greek mythology, who is the guardian of the underworld. Then we got Adel, Gnoster and Meris, who seems to be more primitive life forms compared to the much more sophisticated Libra, Fulghor and Caligo, the next 3 bosses sandwiched in between the gatekeeper Gladius and the main boss Heolstor. So let us apply this order to this mirror template by putting the first 4 bosses on top, and then after the divide in the middle, putting the rest of the 4 onto the bottom. Gladius is now at the top with the moon, and its reflection, Heolstor, is on the very bottom, next to the reflection of the moon. So now we connected Gladius with Heolstor. This is probably the strongest point of my theory, because Gladius is connected to Heolstor through the story as well, as he was his wolf, and he is being loyal to him. Gladius even uses one of Heolstor's swords against you. So in their case, we can make a master and its animal connection between the 2 characters. If you want to read more about this story, it is being written in Gladius's relic description, which tells the story of how this wolf met with Heolstor. And now this is where things get really interesting. Let's take a step further inside towards the center. The next 2 Nightlords on the list is Adel, Baron of Night, the beastie-looking, hungry, malformed black dragon, and its counterpart on the other end, Caligo, Miasma of Night, the beautiful white dragon. Adel at first sight is not really looking like a dragon, but it has wings, and in its description it is said that it was once a great dragon, but got transformed by the influence of the night. And one more interesting way to connect the 2 dragons is via the status effect that they can cause on you. Adel inflicts bleed, while Caligo inflicts frost. Both are not only the 2 strongest status effects in the game, but even their icon shape is very similar, one showing a bleeding wound, while the frost effect showing the same shape but in blue and white colors. However, I'm not saying the 2 dragons are also connected story-wise, as in their description nothing points towards it. But it's still pretty cool how they can be connected in other ways, such as both being dragons, one being darkness and associated with the body, hunger and bleed, while the other dragon potentially represent light and associated with the mind, all of these concepts being the opposite of each other, or in other words, each other's reflection. Taking a step further towards the center, we got the three insect-like beings, Gnoster the moth, Fortis the giant insect that resembles a scorpion, and there is also a third creature, Anima, a red spirit that possesses them, heals them, and revives them upon taking over their bodies. Fulghor, on the other hand, is a completely different being, a centaur who is missing an arm and uses a lance and a bow against us. And to be honest, this pair is the only exception on my list that I'm not sure how to connect, but they are definitely the two most odd Nightlords. However, I can give you a few ideas for similarities. The first idea I have how to connect them is through their holy essence, which is obvious at Fulghor, but less so at Gnoster. However, you can see golden leaves scattered around on its arena in the second phase, could suggest being the leaves of the holy golden earth tree. Gnoster could also be associated with the holy Mikola through its moth-like form, which is also one of the features of both Mikola and his sister Melania. Radon could also be seen in the form of the bigger and stronger Fortis, and Gnoster actually rides on its head, similarly to how Mikola rides on Radon's shoulders. So through that, we also get a holy essence association with Gnoster. Fulghor could also be looked at similarly to Radon, both having a very similar heroic music and fighting style. I can also see the two Nightlords as one being the master of the mind and magic, while the other is being the master of the body and physical strength. Then finally, they both have some kinda similar attacks, such as the one where Fortis and Fulghor starts running around the arena and try to hit you that way, or the raining magic arrows from above that Fulghor can cast upon you, that Gnoster can also do via the flap of its wings, although in a more chaotic manner. Then finally, in the center, we have Maris and Libra next to each other. Since they are quite different, I'm going to describe them with only one connection, which is yet again being the affinity they both possess and can use it against you. Sleep for Maris and Frenzy for Libra, and Sleep and Frenzy being visually shown as being the pair opposite of each other, as the Sleep status effect is being illustrated with a closed eye icon, while Frenzy is the same icon, but the eye is wide open, as Frenzy can be interpreted as the opposite of Sleep, which is too much awareness, seeing things you don't meant to see, evoking madness. And this is how I could pair up all Nightlords, as they are being the reflection of each other in some way, as if they would be divided in the middle by a mirror. And now, let's take a look at the list of the Nightfarers and how they are connected. This is going to be the most simple and shortest segment of this video, since there is not much connection between the Nightfarers based on this list in terms of visual and narrative. However, there is a strong gameplay element that is being illustrated. So let's organize the 8 Nightfarers onto the mirror, but this time horizontally, just as they being seen on the user interface. According to that, Wylder, Guardian, Ironeye and Duchess is above, while below them on the water surface reflection there is Raider, Revenant, Recluse and the Executor, which means we have the following pair-ups: Wylder with Raider, representing the strength class from a gameplay perspective. Then we have the Guardian and the Revenant, both being the support class, not being as strong as the first two, and their role in the team is to guard and revive the teammates, or to draw the attention of enemies. Then we have the pair of the Ironeye and the Recluse, both being the ranged class, as not only the Ironeye can shoot enemies from far away, but the Recluse is also considered a ranged class in my opinion, being able to shoot magic from a great distance. Then finally we have the Duchess and the Executor, representing the dexterity class, using weak but fast weapons, and both being very agile and skillful in their art of combat. And that's simply how I can pair them up based on this user interface, which is most likely designed to reflect this, serving a simple gameplay purpose. However, the design of this order actually becomes much smarter and deeper, even from a lore and story perspective, when we start pairing up these characters with the Nightlords, and we start associating them in a similar way if we arrange them in a vertical order and moving towards the center towards each other. So let's organize all these 16 characters, the 8 Nightlords and the 8 Nightfarers, put in comparison with each other as if they would be the reflection or the shadow of each other, or perhaps even an alter ego. And now we finally arrived to the main part of this video, the most fun part that made me blow my own mind away when I discovered it and figured out how all these 16 characters are having so many similarities when they are mashed up together. First, let's organize the Nightfarers on the top of the mirror, going in a simple order from left to right on the UI list of the playable characters to choose from. According to that, the order becomes Wylder on the top, below him continues with the Guardian, Ironeye, Duchess, then continuing on the lower half from left to right with Raider, the Revenant, the Recluse, and finally the Executor. Then we have the 8 Nightlords already organized in a vertical order, so I'm just going to copy paste their list below on the other side of the mirror. And now let's follow the same logic that we did when we paired up the Nightlords. So first we have Wylder on the top and his reflection on the other side, Heolstor on the very bottom. And at this point, the more you know about Nightreign, the more fun things get. This is the strongest connection in the entire list. Wylder is sort of the cover art main character of the story and Heolstor being the main boss. And Wylder has an ending where he can literally become Heolstor himself, taking his place and transforming into him by using a silver tear to reborn, although it seems like they are not the same person in the beginning as their story is being described differently. Wylder being a nomadic warrior who wants to save his sister, while Heolstor is a knight who got all of his fellow men killed, remaining the only survivor. And there are also some visual similarities between the two, by both having a helmet and armor featuring silver colors, and the purple cape of the Wylder's darkness skin is very similar to Heolstor's purple cape. Gameplay-wise, we can also say that Wylder is sort of being a jack of all trades, being capable of using all kinds of weapons, great swords, short swords, daggers, and similarly to him, Heolstor is also using 3 different weapons against us, both showing a great skill in all types of weapons. Overall, this matchup makes the most sense to me, both boys being the main characters of Nightreign, associated with darkness and perhaps even loneliness, and the theme of wandering aimlessly. Next, we have the matchup of the Guardian and Caligo. If we take a step further towards the center of the reflection from both sides, the most obvious similarity between these two creatures is that they both having wings and being capable of flying, although the Guardian is only for a short duration. Visual design wise, their main color are also the same, which is the color of white, being strongly present on Caligo's entire body and arena, while white is also the color of the robes that the Guardian wears under his metallic armor. And the gameplay wise, there is also a similarity within Caligo's boss fight at the part where the dragon is about to release a huge AoE frost attack from the front, a storm of frost, and the only way to avoid getting hit by it is to run and hide behind those giant rocks that appears during this attack, which really reminds me of how the Guardian is also hiding behind his great shield in order to protect himself from attacks. And regardless of what other class you're using during this fight, you have to do the same as the Guardian and hide behind these big rocks that acts like a shield. And as an overall theme, I would say that both Caligo and the Guardian are the most calm and graceful beings in the game. Both features a theme of protecting themselves, as Caligo initially doesn't want to fight you, she just wants to hide and protect herself, similarly to the Guardian, as his name suggests, guarding himself and protecting his flock, being more of a passive personality in this whole war between the two factions. Furthermore, the Guardian doesn't even bear any darkness or hatred within his heart, and he is even capable of forgiveness towards his worst enemy, the Recluse, who turns out to be the person who who caused the loss of his old flock and the break of his own wings, and now he calmly realizes that things changed and she is part of his new flock now, and even becoming best friends in the round table. Next up we have the matchup of Fulghor and the Ironeye. At first look there is no similarity between them, until you realize that Fulghor also pulls out a holy bow in his Everdark form and fires a great arrow at you, similar to the Ironeye's ultimate attack. Secondly, the Ironeye's remembrance story even gets connected to Fulghor, as it becomes part of his mission to take down this Nightlord in order to obtain a relic called the Edge of Order, which allows the Ironeye to kill a traitor of his fellowship with its holy essence, since the traitor is part of those who live in death. And speaking of traitors, it seems like both the Ironeye and Fulghor having to deal with betrayal, as Fulghor also got backstabbed by his comrades, who forbid serving the very gods they should have been loyal to. And finally, as an overall theme, it seems like both characters are some sort of an exception among their own faction, being some sort of a traitor themselves, since Fulghor wields Holy Essence, which is exactly what Heolstor is weak against, suggesting that Fulghor is actually a being who fights or originally was fighting for good reasons, and Ironeye is actually the most evil Nightfarer, who betrays the others in his ending by allowing the night to continue on forever. So both characters in their own ways plays with your perception of who is good and who is evil in this story. The next pair on the list is my absolute favorite one, because they are not only having some mind-blowing connections, but I love these two characters, as Libra is my favorite boss and Duchess is my favorite character to play as, because Libra offers the most fast-paced fight, while Duchess is the fastest character with long dodges that is actually perfect for fighting against Libra, and she can easily get out of his circles and traps. Furthermore, Duchess's ultimate ability, which makes you invisible, is also perfect for Libra's Everdark fight, as it can remove the overwhelming aggro from you and your teammates when you become overwhelmed by the Condemned. But that's not the only connection I can make between the two characters. At first, I was conflicted by this connection and not finding anything in common, then it all clicked. So here is a list of things you can see in common between Libra and Duchess, just to name a few. First, one of them is covering herself and her identity in pure white robes, while the other is covering himself completely in a pure black robe when you first meet them, as they pretending to be something else in order to communicate with you easier. Then later they go, "Tada, I'm showing you my true form," and they throwing away the robe. And in Libra's Everdark form, he can not only summon the Condemned, but he can also use a curse that is very similar to the Duchess's ultimate ability to make you and your teammates invisible. And that's exactly what Libra is using against you, by making your teammates not only partially invisible but completely invisible to mock you with Duchess's ability. Other than these, however, I can only throw a few ideas around, such as the white hand on Libra's staff can be similar to Duchess's white gloves on her hand, or how they are kind of communicating, or at least wanting to communicate with an outer god, or how both can use incantations and sorcery, or how technically both are in charge of other Nightfarers, as Duchess is the commander of them, while Libra can kinda command and summon their evil counterpart, the Condemned, against us. And the Condemned, if I recall correctly, are us, the Nightfarers, but coming from a timeline where they failed their duties and gave in to the Night's influence. And as an overall theme, I can mention that both of them seem to come from the world of Bloodborne, as fans already pointed out how Duchess looks very similar to Lady Maria, especially with her dusk skin, while I myself made a connection with Libra and Gascoigne through their similar musical theme, as it sounds very similar to each other when Libra transforms into a more beast-like form with a long grey fur, resembling to the fur of the cleric beast as well. Here is a recap from my previous video where I pointed out these similarities. And before I move on from Duchess and Libra, I can mention that yet again there is a theme around eyes and seeing. So it seems like Duchess and Libra being the straight opposite of each other when it comes to eyes. In a way that while Duchess is blindfolding herself in order to not be able to see, Libra is straight up obsessed with eyes and being able to see, having way too many eyes all over his body. I can only theorize what it could mean, but perhaps it has something to do with being able to look into the night and let it stare back into you and influence you. The Duchess maybe wants to avoid making any contact with the night to avoid being influenced, while Libra completely embraces it and spreads madness through the eyes and vision. And finally, there is one more link between Libra and the Duchess through the theme of sacrificing something in return to obtain something of equal value. Libra thinks like a true alchemist, as he's also offering you deals, for example, that makes you stronger in one way, but requires a sacrifice of equal value from your part. This strikes a parallel with the beginning and the end of the story of the Duchess, who also have to deal with sacrificing one life for another. In the description of the old pocket watch, we learn that her mother had to sacrifice her own life in order to be able to give birth to her, as the night prevented it. And at the end of her story, the Duchess is also dealing with the temptation to give up their mission to defeat the Nightlord and sacrifice everything for her brother's life. But then she makes peace and says in her journal, "To this end, we must first lay the Nightlord to rest. We need not sacrifice one goal for the other. We can achieve both." So again, this makes me think of the balanced sacrifice, which is associated with Libra, a demon who offers you something, but you have to sacrifice something in return. Perhaps Libra reflects the darkness and guilt within the Duchess's heart, as her mother sacrificed her life for her, and she is being tempted now to resign from the mission and save her brother. The next two characters on the list is Maris and the Raider, and the only connection I can say is that they both originating from the sea. The Raider is a pirate who was a commander of a pirate ship that got wrecked at the shores of this land, whereas Maris is a jellyfish-like creature who is being described as it used to be drifting aimlessly and making a sea out of its surroundings. So one is a pirate, while one is sort of a sea monster. And gameplay-wise, this might sound funny, but I always found it frustrating how Maris is drifting above the player's head and it's always so hard to reach its head. And then we have the Raider, who found the solution to this problem by having his ultimate art summon a tall tombstone which you can stand on and potentially reach Maris if you are lucky. Other than having connection to water and the sea, I cannot really say other similarities for sure, except maybe I can mention how it feels like both the Raider and Maris just seems to be the most chill characters personality-wise, and also the friendliest, as both of Augur's relics giving you abilities related to supporting your teammates, which could be hinting at the Raider's laid-back and friendly personality. Also visually and story-wise, Maris is being described as a creature who used to be aimlessly drifting and blending in with its surroundings, and the Raider's grey color scheme can also reflect the blending in concept, as grey is a color that blends in easily with any other color and becomes hard to see. This could add an additional meaning to the Raider, who easily finds his place and blends in with the colorful crew of the Nightfarers and goes along well with anyone. Furthermore, the Raider in size is actually the biggest guy among the Nightfarers, and similarly to him, Maris is also the largest Nightlord among all of them in his Everdark form when he transforms, oversizing even Caligo. So that's one more interesting connection between these two great characters. Next up we have Gnoster and the Revenant. When you look at the cute, fluffy moth with the white and blue colors, the similarity between him and the Revenant immediately becomes clear, as both are innocent looking. One is a moth, one is a doll, resembling a young girl, dressed in pure white with a blue flower crown. Furthermore, both of them excelling at using magic. And similarly, to have the Revenant can summon and fight alongside a second person, one of the spirits of her 3 family members, Gnoster is also fighting alongside a second member who is being Fortis, the giant scorpion-looking insect. So in a way, Gnoster and Revenant could be a nice matchup as well against each other, as you can summon a spirit to distract the attention of Fortis and Gnoster while you fight the other creature. But while both the moth and the doll looking innocent, inside of them there is a spirit of a second being lurking. Revenant has the vengeful spirit of a murdered girl inside of her body, while Gnoster has a red spirit hiding inside called the Anima. And on top of that, both Anima and the Revenant have an ability to revive their dying comrades. Anima can even heal its teammates by reviving them, and the Revenant can do it as well by equipping a relic that allows her to fully heal teammates at the expense of her own HP upon using her ultimate art. Next up we have Adel and the Recluse. The most obvious way I can connect these two is through their color scheme. Adel is a black dragon whose sky also turns pure black, while also having bright purple colors on the sky, also reflecting the purple electricity attacks that he uses against us. And the Recluse's clothing also features 2 primary colors, having her skirt black while other parts of her clothes are purple. And similarly to Adel, the Recluse also fights with all sorts of magic attacks since she is a wizard. And if you remember my previous connections, I draw a link between Caligo and Adel, the 2 dragons, and between Caligo and the Guardian. And there is a strong connection between the Recluse and the Guardian as well, as they not only become close friends, but it also turns out that their past is connected to each other, as the Recluse is actually responsible for the destruction of the Guardian's previous comrades, yet he forgives her. Furthermore, both Adel and the Recluse seems to have so many other themes in common in their stories, such as blood, storm, hues of azure, transforming life, and endless appetite. Allow me to briefly go through each of these. Blood is a huge theme for Adel, as he inflicts bleed damage on you if he catches you and starts chewing. And the Recluse also have a theme of using blood magic, as the witch's brooch item description reads the following: a brooch imbued with potent magic made from the blood magic crystal received from the Recluse, which is an item that was once used to empower the weapons that robbed the Guardian of his flock and from his wings, but this time the Recluse gifting this brooch to him to be used as a relic. And also there is a theme of a violent storm in both Adel and the Recluse, as the dragon is capable of summoning a huge tornado in his Everdark form, while the Recluse's brooch once originally used as a ceremonial tool to calm violent winds, but the war demanded her to use it for offensive purposes. Then we have Adel's story, whose island got destroyed of life by a rain, which had the colors of azure, which could refer to the magic that the Recluse uses, and the weapon that the Recluse happened to create is actually a cursed weapon that is capable of transforming life itself, which could be put in parallel with how Adel was once a graceful great dragon, but got terribly transformed. And lastly, something regarding the Recluse's questline really sticks out to me, that is straight up reminds me of Adel's insatiable hunger, which is none other than the dark devouring infant that the Recluse gave birth to. An infant that also has an insatiable hunger, who started devouring everyone in his shadow and got attracted to the night because of it, starting to gnaw on the night shard as well. Then finally, we got the Executor being mashed up in the center of the reflection with none other than Gladius, the red wolf with 3 heads. And the similarity is strikingly clear at first sight, as both the Executor and Gladius having their main color scheme of orange. Furthermore, the Executor can literally transform into a red wolf that is very similar to Gladius if you think about it. And I would argue that story-wise, the Executor is also similar to Gladius. In a way, they both having 3 heads, or in other words, 3 different personalities inside one body, and the Executor also having not only 2, but potentially 3 different personalities inside one body. One being the Painter, one being the Crucible Knight with the huge sword who executed the Painter, and the third one being himself, who witnessed this murder. And I believe that this 3 personality is being reflected in one of the haikus where he describes himself as, I am an artist painting the earth tree. I am a guest bearing a sword. I am silent. I am a witness. So this haiku could refer to 3 different persons: the artist, the guest, which is a sword-bearing Crucible Knight, and the silent witness himself, who is actually being a silent person, literally being the only Nightfarer who doesn't talk. So this 3 personality in one body could reflect the 3 heads of Gladius. And there you have it. I managed to connect all 16 characters with each other, giving each Nightlord a Nightfarer as a perfect match that reflects them. I wonder if this have an actual narrative implication, as maybe the 8 Nightfarers have been chosen specifically to match the 8 Nightlords, as they are the perfect reflection of them, and there is a deep spiritual connection between them. Or if it's the other way around, and the Nightlords are the actual manifestations originating from the Nightfarers, who are allegorically stuck in purgatory and having to face their own shadows, their own demons, that reflects their subconscious. And with that, I wrote down all my thoughts regarding this topic. I hope I managed to explain my point well, but if you are still confused by something and have questions, let me know in the comments. But I would also love to hear your opinions, and even better, if you found more connections between these characters, be it either through their visual design or narrative, story, or even gameplay. So thank you so much for watching and listening to me, it makes me very happy. If you are curious for more Nightreign content, I recommend checking out my previous video on Nightreign storytelling details, which you can see showing up on the end screen soon. And with that, thank you again for watching, and see you next time.